From Albany Public Library, I'm Ryan Slowey. This is the Albany Made Podcast. We're here today to share with you a conversation between myself and Executive Director Scott Jarzenbeck about the library's place amidst a pandemic, the outgrowth of an anti-fact social climate, the news media, leadership in our community, and the political divide in the United States. In our 10 Minutes with the Director segment, Scott speaks with Associate Vice President of Enterprise Risk Management and Compliance at UAlbany, Kevin Wilcox, about the university's response to the pandemic. Since their discussion, the university has gone on full pause in response to a spike in cases on campus.
Librarians across the country will tell you we've had a real issue with truth and people accepting facts. I was thinking the other day while I was walking my dog, I would love to be reincarnated and be a historian 50 years from now, because I think when people look back at this period in history, between everything that's gone on around economics, around this pandemic, around racial injustice, what historians will see is it came down to this is what happens when people stop believing truth. And people stop believing facts, and people stop having the ability to have a conversation with each other. I just answered a patron's email. I haven't got a lot of emails from patrons about how come you're not open, but I got one today. And to be honest, the response fell in with the rhetoric that we've had in this country today, which is people are just, using words that are calling things ridiculous and things like that. It's just, no, we have a well thought out plan and we want to protect people. And the responses I get from people about politics or anything like that, they're not well thought out. And I think the way some people are approaching this pandemic, it's not well thought out. You can't use the power of positive thinking to end the pandemic. Currently, we literally have a federal government which is run with the power of positive thinking. We have a president who's a huge fan of Peele, the religious philosopher who really introduced the power of positive thinking. And I'm not against positive thinking, but there are just some problems that are existential and they're beyond that power.
It's the difference between how you want things to be and how things actually are. And I can completely understand the frustration. Something that on an existential level is very scary. And I'm always taking an overabundance of caution. Some of my friends think I'm nuts, but I'm doing what I have to do to not feel so panicked, and yeah. I don't expect other people to get to my level on that. I would actually hate for other people to experience it that way. But the divorce from reality and just honestly, the lack of resolve. I mean, I know it's been 6 months now, but in the grand scheme of things, it's not a ton of time and it's gone by so fast.
In history, 6 months is nothing. This is the first prolonged negative impact on American life since probably World War II. And I know I just skipped over Korea and Vietnam and the 2009 recession and all those things, but this is the most serious thing we've had to deal with as a nation in a really, really long time. World War II impacted everyone, and the Depression impacted everybody's day-to-day life because you couldn't do certain things because the nation just couldn't do it because the resources weren't there. I am a negative person. That's the way I am.
I think I am
and everybody keeps getting freaked out because I'm usually except for in professional meetings with other library directors where I'm always the doomsayer and it kind of bums me out. But when I'm talking one-on-one with people, when I'm talking one-on-one with my friends, I'm like the positive one, which is not a role I like playing. But I am looking, this is bad. This is bad. And when you're in those situations, you got to look at the positive stuff. You can't drown yourself. I doom scroll. I'm on Reddit for like 3 hours. It's and I get myself off of it, but you got to look for the positive. And there's tons of positives in this. And there are more people doing the right thing than we give credit. We keep looking at the small number of people who are just completely out there. And we're focusing on the outliers when in reality, the majority of people out there are at least doing something to take this seriously. Maybe not as seriously as we'd like them to take it, but they're at least wearing a mask, they're socially distanced, or they're at least doing bubbles. all of those things, or at least doing something. And there's some people that are just out there acting like it's everyday life, and that's not great. And then there are people who are out there who, I was somewhere where this family walked past, you could tell the guys were very proud they weren't wearing masks, and they were just looking at everybody for wearing masks. It's like, how sad does your life need to be if that's what you're proud of that day? You should be proud of wearing a mask. I wear a mask. I don't care what it makes me look like. You should be proud of protecting your neighbors, your friends, your family, your country, your community. Not proud that you don't care if you get sick. You can't fear death to the point where it's paralyzing, but you can also be careful not to bring it on early.
I was talking to a medical professional recently, and most people are fine. They get sick and they're fine. Most people are doing the right thing. Everything you said. The problem is it's not the sexy thing on TV or the radio, or you know what I mean. So it's like she said this. All the really terrible stories you hear online about
are amplified.
They're only reporting on those things because that's what, like you said, you get into the doom and gloom of it and you kind of get lost in it, and that's what people like.
The news generally being driven to an online format, to a website format, has really impacted the way we receive information. I know people want to blame CNN and Fox and the 24-hour news cycle, but the reality of it is that's a small piece of the pie, and the real big piece of the pie is online. And the danger that's there is the fact that you get paid by your click. You get paid by your page being loaded so that all the advertisements show up. So I always tell people when they freak out, okay, here's the headline. And this is why I love Reddit. I'll give a shout out to Reddit because people in Reddit often point this out. The headline, sometimes you can't even find in the story. Or it's, Dr. Fauci says this, and then you read the story and you find out that he said that, but once you put it in context, it's not nearly as scary or impactful. So we're, the way we receive information now is so driven to make people money through advertising and through clicks that we just get in these cycles. And when you write a newspaper article, you don't get to pick the headline. Amanda doesn't get to pick the headline over at the TU. That's an editor or somebody else. And you'll actually notice headlines will be different on some websites. So you write this great story, it's informative, and then, it goes to the editor, and the editor is like, okay, well, we need to get clicks. So we need to make the headline this. There's two components of this. One, so we're driving the freak out. So you look at the story and all the ads pop up. The second component of that is some people only read the headlines and then share it on social media. And, social media, it's the headline and maybe the first paragraph.
I'm guilty of that myself. I've done it.
Yeah. And that's what's caused an issue. Again, when historians look back at this time, it was a disease of information. So, you have those components.
Well, you're also just being assaulted by information from all directions at all times. They're not vetting the sources. And especially with Facebook, I had to get off Facebook completely because I just couldn't hang anymore. I couldn't handle the just relentless onslaught of just bad information and then getting lost in the comments and engaging with people that I don't even know. And, it's just like it's this kind of snowballing effect. And I think it's been dangerous for many years now, but I think it's particularly evident now. I think it started getting worse in 2016, and now it's kind of reached its apex.
Well, you've had non-digital natives adopt the technology that I don't know if they were really prepared to take on. That's Facebook without a doubt. I mean, I wish I still taught digital literacy classes because I'd be given lessons on Facebook if I could. I do think the media has it out for the president, and that anything negative that they can put out, they will put out. And they know that drives clicks too. And they know that drives traffic. Everything's segmented. Fox is Fox because it's got its base, and those people will always come to it because they want that message. CNN is CNN because it has that base. CNN would never put a pro-Trump thing on their website because their readers would revolt. And Fox would never do a pro-Biden thing on its website because its readers would revolt. And that's happened. If I look at CNN, I automatically look at Fox. I try not to use either of those for my news But if I'm going to look at one, then I'm going to look at the other because I'm curious to see what both sides of the story are. And I do think there's a little bit of an in-between.
Yeah, New York Times, Washington Post, those are the ones I usually stick with. It's like the newspaper journalists seem to be approaching virtually everything in a much less sensationalized, more just kind of, we're going to tell you the facts kind of way.
TV news it's entertainment. During the Carter administration, I think it was the Carter administration, when I think it was Nightline decided to hire a producer that was from like their football or sports component. And that's when all of a sudden, the 80s was the start of news becoming entertainment. All of a sudden you've got CNN, you've got 24/7 news channels. So I only do local news, and I'll do CBS because it's less sensationalized than CNN or Fox, because CNN and Fox are competing with each other for advertisements and eyes on them.
Even just the inflection of the way they speak, it's very obvious that
they have a fan base.
They're like that dude that's like in a world.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
But if you think about it, they're like a genre of music. They've got their fan base. They have their base. They know what they do well. They're not going to step out of it.
I could never imagine being like a fan of a news anchor. It doesn't make any sense to me.
Oh, I was a huge Walter Cronkite. When I was a kid, I wanted to be in the news. So I was a huge Walter Cronkite fan.
My mom was Jim Lehrer, Peter Jennings. I remember those guys very well.
But they were like statesmen.
Well, they were so eloquent and dry. It was very dry.
Barbara Walters, who wasn't dry, but she did it so well, and she was compelling. And she became a little bit more entertainment as she moved on in her career, but in her early career, she was a great news person. She was someone whose voice, if you heard, you looked up and you listened to what they said. And we don't really have that anymore. I mean, we went from Walter Cronkite to, Chris Cuomo. Chris Cuomo's interesting. I'll watch him. He's interesting, but he's not a statesman.
You trusted those people. There was an era of that where you had your go-to and you trusted that person.
Yep.
If you're glued to the 24-hour news stuff, they're just constantly grasping for something to talk about, and they're often like repeating things over and over again. And there's something about the sort of succinct delivery, and then we move on to the next topic of a typical news hour that makes you feel you're getting the right information. In a time like this, it could offer some comfort.
We're not offering comfort right now. That is not what. That's why the news and even entertainment, there's not comfort. There's a real lack of adults in the room. The people who are on TV and a part of entertainment, and many of our elected officials, they're not acting like adults. They're acting like something completely different. And it's a disappointment. This has been an interesting time to be in leadership and teach leadership. I teach an administration class over at SUNY, and it's so many bad examples. And a lot of what we look for in leadership over the last decade, those traits and those personalities have faltered when they've really been challenged. So I think we're going to come out of this stronger because, we're going to respect strong leadership again.
Up until this pandemic, and I'm a little embarrassed to say this, but I never paid attention to state level governing. I never paid attention to local governing. And it's proven now that without that, I think we'd really feel more lost at sea, and we might even be in a much worse place right now, because it's just, there's nothing about the government on a federal level that ever feels comforting or often even believable at this point. I mean, the amount of just blatant nonsense that comes out of their mouths is just insane to me. I don't know how to, I honestly don't know how to process it most of the time.
And I think most people have checked out. And I think in some ways that allows people who are in power to get away with what they get away with. Locally, have seen some amazing leadership, and, not just in regards to elected officials. I've seen some incredible leadership being done by people who aren't elected, people who run nonprofits, people who don't even run nonprofits. They're just neighbors.
Do you have an example?
Yeah. I mean, I'll give Youth Effects a shout out whenever I can, because they've been engaged and a part of the South End, and it's just nonstop. They're just not, they're out there. They're, around the Black Lives Matter protests that were going around in the summer. They were out there, they were videotaping, they were keeping an eye on things. That kind of leadership's pretty amazing. And it's also amazing because it's the younger cohort of that nonprofit. It's literally the son of one of the founders, but it's the younger group at Youth Effects is doing incredible work. The Urban League has been doing some work around the census and kind of getting things out there. That's been really, really impressive. Boys and Girls Club, I mean, they seem to really be out there and really engaged in doing stuff. I think those groups are, that's a strength right there. And I hope people recognize that when we're on the other side of this, that, those groups were there and they were working really, really hard. And those are the groups I want to partner with. Those are the groups I want to work with. Because, they're out there, they're in the community. Red Bookshelf's another one. They're out there, they're in the community, they're doing outreach, they're communicating with us, we're coming together to figure things out. And I just have to give them a lot of credit because, again, they're out there and safely. Being out there safely is, you got to show, especially if you're working with kids, you got to show the community, hey, this is the norms now.
I think probably one of the better things that's come as a result of this situation is the way that it's galvanized, sort of the generation that's coming up behind us. I think the way young people in general have been motivated to be involved in things and help people, even on small levels. I feel like there was a lack of that level of humanity, and now people are being faced with something that's sort of inspiring them to get some of that back.
Even when we're almost out of the woods with COVID, all of the things that are going to cascade after that are going to create challenges for us. And there's going to be an economic impact, and there's going to be a social impact, and there's going to be a mental health impact. And we have to really prepare ourselves for that.
Where do you see the library falling into that?
I don't know. I've always been someone who could figure out where libraries go next. In order to be in the position that I'm in, you need to have very forward-thinking thoughts about the world and the organization. I'm struggling. I'm struggling.
It's an unprecedented thing.
Yeah.
I mean, at least for us.
For, the last time we had a pandemic this size, and again, Spanish flu, much more deadly than COVID. So the last time we ran into this, public libraries operated very much in the transactional phase of the world. We didn't bridge the digital divide. People weren't coming to the library to be on a computer for 3 hours. They were coming to the library to sit down, read the paper, and then leave. They were a community hub, but there were other places for people to meet. So that whole public meeting space, that also was a big thing of what libraries did. So yeah, the modern library, the pre-1923 libraries, and the 2000 libraries and what libraries have grown and become, and we never expected anything like this. And we've never faced anything like this. I just don't know. I don't know. I mean, I hate saying that. I mean, and I know that's not reassuring to anybody, but I don't know. I think we'll get back to what we were doing, not anytime soon, but I do think we will be back to serving the community the way we served the community. But I also think we need to think about some of the places where we were a Band-Aid, and that sometimes we let people who were in power get away with not concentrating on issues that they needed to concentrate on. I think in a lot of ways, libraries have been used to just explain some things about our social and economic world. That it's great that we do that. It's great that we help people in that way, but at the same time, we're not improving. We're catching fish for people. We're not teaching people how to fish. We do a lot, and we're not necessarily set up to do everything that we do. I don't know what the future looks like, but I know what my goals are. My goal is to right now take this time to look internally and fix some of the internal stuff we do that always impeded on the external stuff we did. Fix that. And I know this sounds very executive director-like, but it's true. It's, let's fix all these little things that we needed to fix in the past and we put off. Now we don't have time, but we have a little bit of bandwidth that we can do it. So my goal is for not only Albany Public Library to survive this, and survive it means that staff don't become sick. We don't become a place where people are like, oh my God, don't go to the library. You're going to get sick if you go to the library. But also come out of this so that we're better. We had a little bit of time to sit back and just be introspective and think, how do we not do things the same way we always did them in the past? That's my hope for my organization. That's my hope for me as a person. That's my hope for the community and society I live in, that we're going to come out of this stronger. for 10 minutes with the director, might be 15 minutes with the director, we'll see. I'm interviewing Kevin Wilcox, and he's with UAlbany, and I'm going to give him an opportunity to introduce himself and tell us what he does at UAlbany.
Yeah, my name's Kevin Wilcox. I'm the Associate Vice President for Enterprise Risk Management and Compliance at UAlbany, and I've been in the position about 2.5 years. I've been with SUNY about 21 years. I was the controller for 19 years before I took this current position. And what I oversee is a variety of areas, including internal controls, internal audit, and Title IX compliance, and a lot of compliance and policy areas. But one of the areas is also emergency management. And as that, with that position, is how I got involved with the oversight of the University of Albany's COVID-19 response.
And when did SUNY start working on a plan for the pandemic?
I can almost remember it to the day. It was around January 21st, 22nd of 2020, and I got a notice from our Office of International Programs saying, hey, we've got to start thinking about bringing our study abroad students home from China, South Korea, Spain, Italy, and reach out to my offices. I'm the Chief Risk and Compliance Officer for the university, so she reached out to me from that office. And from that point forward, I drafted up a memo about our position, because at that point in late January, our students were arriving for the spring semester from overseas. We had visiting faculty coming from overseas. So we put a plan together immediately of how we would make sure that those folks arrived safely, quarantined, self-quarantining, et cetera, and then to also start to bring our students home from the affected areas.
And what was initially the response that you got from faculty and staff and members of the university's community? Was there some apprehension? Was there some denial? Or do you think kind of everyone accepted it pretty quickly to move forward with the plan?
Well, the plan, as far as bringing students home, there was some apprehension right at the beginning of, boy, do we really have to do this? And it became clear very quickly. And UAlbany, fortunately, has been sort of a step ahead of a lot of places because we got on this early, frankly. So folks started to realize this was serious, this was real. We were working kind of underground, if you will, just really on the study abroad stuff till about early March, when the cases really took off downstate, obviously, and then in New York City. And then it became real for our campus. And it was around mid-March, just before we were going on spring break, which is where we actually shut down for the semester, was at that time. But was when we had our first case. We had already announced we were going remote learning and when we came back from spring break, but then we had our first case. It was an off-campus student who came to visit folks on campus and had tested positive. And that was a shocker for everybody because it really had hit home at that point. And it was the first case in Albany County.
How in-depth is your plan? I mean, how many pages and how many times have you changed it, and how much has it grown over the last 6 months?
Unbelievable amounts. What we did immediately, we set up a response task force. It initially was our COVID-19 task force, which I co-chaired with our provost. And it was a smaller group at the beginning of starting to it was more managing how students would go home for spring, how we would work through the spring semester. Our academic folks around there, they did a tremendous job of shifting to remote learning, 100% remote learning within a week. Amazing job. So we kind of worked through spring. And as everybody knows, this is an unknown. We didn't know what was coming next as well as anybody else. Immediately, pretty much upon the students going home in March, we started to build toward the fall. And we started to say, okay, what are we going to do for fall? We made some initial decisions, which was study abroad program we're bringing all our students home. We're actually not going to plan on sending anybody overseas for the fall. All summer programs are going online. Those were the initial decisions we made. We then started building toward fall and what we would look for in fall. The plan, which we called One UAlbany Forward Together plan, we then separated and a group went off and built the plan for the fall. At the same time, I set up what we already had established as part of our emergency management program, what we call an incident management team. And that incident management team includes people at the really get it done kind of level from across the university that we would bring together when we had an emergency, a water main break or something like that. We use that group, and that has been the standing group that has overseen the implementation of the Forward Together plan that the other group put together. There was literally, I would say, well over 100 people involved in putting these plans together from across the university. And now the structure we have is the incident management team is set up. I chair that. I oversee the day-to-day. We meet 3 days a week, every Monday, Wednesday, Friday morning. I then meet with the Forward Together group, which is still there, the task force, to report up to them, which is the provost, the vice president for student affairs, and the vice president for finance administration. I report back to them on where we are, and that is our decision-making level. So we have a whole structure involving, and under the IMT incident management team, there's various subgroups that we have set up to address specific areas: athletics, academics, residential life, the various areas. And those teams work underneath the incident management team. Again, we have better than 100 people involved right now in managing this.
How do you think the plan's going so far? I mean, it's the metrics I know scared everybody at first, but those numbers seem to be kind of stabilizing a little bit. Are you proud of this plan? Do you think you're going to have to make serious changes? How are you overall feeling about the planning, not just the process, but how it's going so far?
I feel good about the plan. Let's face it, this comes down to, we put a lot of plans in place as far as we're under 50% of our normal housing capacity at this point. So we can do de-densification in that area and not be so dense. Our classes are, 65% or better remote or hybrid, where we don't have that many students coming to class on campus. So the plans are all there. The social distancing, the amount of furniture we remove from rooms to spread people out and everything. We have it stored all over on the campus. All summer long, people just worked so hard to get ready for fall. The plan is there. It comes down to behavior. And I've said this all along, it comes down to behavior. And at the beginning of the semester, unfortunately, we had a couple activities that took place that were not university activities, parties and that kind of stuff. And it took that, I think, for students to understand that it does come down to behavior. So we had a couple blooms, is what we call a bloom. We could track them back to specific incidents. We have a contact tracing team on campus in addition to the county and the city. So as soon as we get a case, we start to track it ourselves on where it came from. We start to move folks into quarantine or what's called person under investigation status for having COVID-19. So you talked about the plan. It's extensive. We test. We have an on-site, off-campus lab. North Shore Labs is on campus doing PCR nasal tests as we need. We also do pool testing, which is saliva-based pool testing right on the campus. We actually do our own testing. The other SUNYs are sending theirs to Upstate Medical Center. We don't do that. Our RNA Lab Institute set it up ourselves. We do our testing. We're testing around 500 people a day on campus through a pool. 4 samples are tested together. If it comes up negative, then it's all good. If it comes up that there's a positive in that pool, we then drill down to determine which one is the positive, and then we send that person for further diagnostic testing. And what we're looking to do there is identify asymptomatic people who don't even realize they have it and get those out of the general population. So the plan is working well. The students, I have to say, on campus are behaving very well. They're masking. You don't go anywhere on campus where you don't see students in masks. They're doing a really good job. The off-campus students, I think, are now getting the message that they have to follow the same rules if we're going to get through the semester, and that's why we're seeing our numbers coming down at this point.
What does the spring semester look like?
The same thing. We're now planning for spring, and in fact, we're planning for spring and fall 2021 right now. Specifically, we put our academic calendar together for spring. We will not open up till February 1st, probably, to give a little more time. Now, we don't do this in a vacuum. SUNY and the state will also give us direction on what the spring is going to look like. We know we're not going to have a widespread vaccine distributed for this by the spring semester. We have already set up, by the way, and started to prepare for how we would distribute that vaccine on campus. We've already planned for that, working with the county, et cetera, how we would do that. Like for instance, this fall, we're running probably, 16 flu clinics on campus this fall, a lot more than we normally run in order to hopefully take care of the flu and get that out of the way so we're not worried about that. So all this stuff is planned well ahead of time. But like I said, our academic calendar is already set and adjusted for spring. We're already looking at our course selections, which will be taught in person and which ones will be taught remotely. That's all being worked out by academic affairs right now. And we are already planning for our surveillance testing. We'll step it up even more in the spring. And our unions have signed on for the fall. PEF, UUP and CSEA unions are signed down that those employees that are coming out to campus will test mandatorily through our pooled surveillance testing. And all of our students who are coming to campus are also mandated to test right now every other week on that. We may step up to every week for our students come spring. It's a matter of ramping up. And you had asked earlier, do we adjust the plan all the time? I mean, no one has been through this. I don't know anybody that was around in 1918, the last time we had a pandemic. So this is all new for everybody. We're talking to our peers. We're learning from other people. We're paying attention to the guidance. We have experts, and we're very lucky to have a School of Public Health and our faculty, epidemiologists, and the dean from the School of Public Health are involved in our planning, and they advise me as we go through this so I don't make a misstep or from a scientific basis. And they are very heavily involved in our surveillance testing program. So we've got a lot of expertise, and it is a constant of adjusting as we learn as we go through this.
How has this impacted your personal life? What changes have you made in your personal life? I made numerous. I'm like the COVID czar of my neighborhood. I was wearing masks early because of the stuff that I was seeing. How has this affected you personally? I mean, you working from home 24/7 or?
No, my first question would be what personal life? It's been 24/7, 7 days a week since January, pretty much. I have an emergency manager who works for me who's terrific. But between him and I, we kind of are the core of the team. And it's interesting you bring that up. I don't actually work from home. I go to the office every day. There's not a lot of us there, but we operate and I'm home today. And the reason I'm actually home today is I have so much vacation time built up because I haven't taken any time. I got to get rid of some or I lose it at the end of the year. So I am kind of taking a day, but working from home. But normally we're both in the office. My vice presidents, a lot of that I work with are in the office. Obviously, social distancing. We have our own offices. We practice very careful, lead by example. It is a 24/7, though. We have cases come up every day. We talk to the county health department every day, 7 days a week. We report into SUNY every day, 7 days a week. The interesting thing is what I'm doing right now is realizing, and what is different about this emergency is the length. And I'm now realizing is I have to have a second level of people to do this because we cannot continue at this pace, the folks that are on the front line for another potentially year from now. And so we're actually standing up of various people to duplicate what we do so we have backup so we can actually have some downtime personally, have redundancy, so that if something were to happen to one of us, we're not, in trouble if we were to get ill or whatever. We're very careful about that because if one of us goes down with COVID or anything else, we got a problem. So now I'm starting to set up that redundancy and staffing and knowledge so that we can carry this forward for what we think will be another year.
Let's end on a hopeful note. What's a positive from this that you see going forward after we move through this?
I think this is the challenge for our generation. And I think we'll come out of it stronger and ready to respond as a community. But also, I think there's probably been a lot of reconnection among families during this because of the, quarantining and they're just staying at home and kind of laying low. I think there were some things that will probably change our society forever coming out of this. But the positive that I see is growing as a community, and I think probably reconnection as families.
Thank you for taking time on your day off to speak with me, and it was definitely totally worthwhile. Thank you.
The Albany Made podcast is a production of Albany Public Library in Albany, New York. Produced by Ryan Slowey. Today's music provided by The Whitehall Sessions. For more, visit thewhitehallsessions.bandcamp.com. You can find more episodes on iTunes, SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts, and other podcast apps. You can also listen on our YouTube page at Albany NY Library or on our website, albanypubliclibrary.org. Thank you for listening.